You know, weeds can be, in an organic garden, weeds can be one of the biggest issues. It's also, you know, in some ways what makes the garden look really, really nice is when it doesn't have weeds. Because then you can see all the vegetables, you see the different rows of vegetables, you see all the colors. And the lack of weeds, the plants are healthier because they're getting more air, they're getting more nutrients. It's easier to harvest because there's not weeds in the way. So if you're, you know, trying to cut herbs and stuff, you're not just cutting a bunch of grass and herbs with it. And I think most people would like to have a garden that is free of weeds, but that's going to be the, you know, the biggest work. And it's going to be the biggest work at the beginning, hopefully, and then the maintenance shouldn't be much work. Riv, that's the bed, dude, not the path. Because if you're constantly just pulling out big, large weeds, then you're probably already behind. And then it's something you're going to have to do and get to zero. And that's the most important bit about weed control is starting from zero. So when you creating your beds and you create, you know, the boundaries of your garden, you know, that's the point at which you want to try to remove, you know, every weed. And that can be difficult. One of the easier ways, if you have time, is to tarp the whole thing. So you can get like a black tarp from like a big box store, like a big hardware store. And, you know, they used to have them in, you know, many different sizes. So you get a size that's slightly bigger than your garden, and you weigh it down with rocks. And it could take a whole year for everything in there to die. And then you can start out from zero. Maybe you might have a few poke up or something, and you can take those out. But that's going to be your easiest route. But it takes a while. You know, it's going to take a long time to get that accomplished. Once you have zero weeds, you got to decide how you're going to manage it going forward. And, you know, there's different options on managing them. One is that you use some sort of mulch, and that can be plastic mulch in a bed, and then you plant through holes. And, you know, you can see that's not something I do here. There's also mulch for paths, where you can like put wood chips down on the paths and keep down weeds that way. That's not something I do either. Just from my experience as farming, it's a bit more work. But if you like the look of it and it's pretty to you, and you know, it does look really, really nice. You know, I've had gardens where I've had wood chips in the past, and it does look great. And in that case, you know, you want to put it as thick as you can. You're obviously going to need wider paths than what I have here if you're going to use wood chips, because they're going to spill into the garden a bit. They have to be pretty thick, and you have to maintain them by constantly adding more wood chips and hand weeding them. Because once you do add wood chips, you no longer have the luxury of being able to cultivate the pathways, which can just take a few minutes. Now you're actually going to have to hand weed them through the wood chips, because some weeds will come up through them and you'll have to use your hands to get them out. Which leads to really the last method, which is cultivation, which I find the most easy, but it's something that needs to be done regularly. And even if you put wood chips in the path or you put plastic in the beds, there's still going to be weeds. So in any bare soil, you're going to have to cultivate it. And the way I cultivate, and the thing is, you're going to have to start from zero. Remember that. You're not going to just go in here and cultivate a bunch of perennial weeds. And a perennial weed is something like, it's something that's going to last year after year after year. And that's going to be grass or dandelion or things that don't die when the freeze comes. And that's going to change where you are of what's a perennial, what isn't. But I also throw big weeds into the perennial category because it's anything you're going to have to remove by hand and you're going to have to remove the roots of. Because removing the tops of grass is not going to do anything. Just like if you remove the dandelion and you snap the big long root, that dandelion is just going to keep growing and actually getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So starting from zero means you don't have any of those. Because what you're going to be cultivating is you're going to be cultivating, very small weeds, right? So here's something like this, right? That's as big as you want to go. All right, so you can go a little bigger than this, but the chances drop dramatically of you being able to kill it as you're cultivating it. And that's why you just need to cultivate regularly. Because most of the time you're killing things much smaller than this, things that just germinated. And it's what's called a thread stage weed, because it's just a thin little thread and maybe has two little tiny leaves. And you can't even see it when you're standing up, which is why when you're cultivating all of the surface of your garden. So what you want to do is start in one of the corner beds. And here for me, that's leeks. And it doesn't matter, you got to work with a cultivator that you like. For me, I like wire weeders because I have different sizes depending on how many rows per bed. So the leeks are 3, and so this one works with 3 rows on a bed, right? So it fit perfectly between those two. And I just come through and I'm just disturbing the top 1/4 to 1/2 an inch of soil. And I come down the other row. Just like that. Then I want to do the outside. Then I come back down in here and I'm overlapping the path. So that when I do the path, we make sure that we're cultivating. If you imagine this is like a paint roller, right? You're trying to make sure you paint the whole entire area of bare soil, right? You're cultivating, but you want to think of it like you don't want to miss a lot of spots. You'll actually notice that when you cultivate this, and like if you missed a little, you're missing in between the leeks, and you'll see little weeds come up in between there because you actually didn't cultivate in between there. And if that's happening on the bed, then you want to go in between the leeks. It's not something you're going to have to do every time. But if you do see weeds, now's the time, because it's a lot harder to get on your hands and knees and then start pulling them out. Right, so I just use a thinner wire and then, I'll just go in between those leeks, right? And this is nice and relaxing, rather than pulling weeds out. And these are really thick, so you got to be a little careful, and it goes a little slower, which is why we don't do it every time. And I'm just making sure that in between the leeks are done. You only need to do it 2 or 3 times through the life of the leek before you harvest it. All right, so then I just work bed by bed. And right now I have an empty bed. And so the way I deal with that, I just have a nice, very wide cultivator. All right, and then I just want to cultivate the whole bed. Right, this way when I plant it, a couple days, I won't be planting into weeds. Okay, and then I move on to something like broccoli. And you see how this bed is really covered. So I can't just do a pattern, right? I'm just gonna go along and cultivate the areas I can see, right? When the broccoli was smaller, I just go in between them and back and forth, get all the soil. But here I can just go and get the soil that I can see, which is in everything. But hopefully I was cultivating before when they were smaller, and so I'm not going to have a lot of weeds, and all I have to do is just get the areas I see. All right, and then something like lettuce heads. All right, gonna need a smaller size. And here it's gonna be very much like the leeks, where I go just in between the heads. So I can start at the edge, right next to it. Then I come back in between them. Then on the other side. And now I can come crossways through them. This way I've covered every bit of soil. And one tip is, when you're doing lettuce, when it's small, it's easy to kick a lot of dirt into them. You just want to slow down a bit, because dirt can cause the lettuce heads to rot, especially when it's wet and rainy. So you want to try to avoid putting lots of dirt in them. Right, and that's it. So you can see that, like, just cultivating, it's easy, it's relaxing, but it's something that needs to be done weekly. Every week you want to cultivate your garden, and it's going to be healthier. The fertilizer that you put down will be worked into the soil. It allows air into the soil, and it's going to keep those weeds down. And you just want to move bed by bed through the garden, getting every bit of surface. And then when you're done, what you're going to want to do is do the paths. All right, and so you want to use some sort of blade for them, because the paths are going to be compacted. So something like this isn't really going to work anymore. And you can see that on this wire weeder, I have thread stage weeds here, right, that it just picked up and killed, ones that you couldn't see. All right, so for compacted, I have to kind of forego these because they're not going to work as well. So I'm going with something that has a blade. And so this is a collinear, and this works nice. You can also use it in the bed. One nice thing about it is it slides under things. So it's really nice for when you have something like a hose and you want to get under it. All right, it slides nice and under it. But this is really good for the path. I just go down the path and I'm just sliding, same thing, like 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, no more than that, underneath the soil surface, right? Trying to stay as shallow as possible. It doesn't take any time at all to do all the paths. You can do it quicker if you want to upgrade your tool and use something like this. They're not too much money. They last forever. The one I have is very old. I have one that's probably 80 years old and still works fine, that I got secondhand. And it's just a wheel, and it has a blade. And this blade is 12 inches, path is 14. So with that overlapping I was doing, I just need to go down the center of the path, and you just want to lightly scrape the top of the surface, right? So you're just a millimeter under. You don't need to dig in, right? It should just lightly slide across, right? Without a lot of effort. I could just use a couple of fingers, right? And that's gonna, if anything builds up on it, just shake it off. then go back to it, right? You know, and one point I want to make is that, you know, rocks are going to get in the way of this. So you want to always be removing rocks when you weed or turn over a bed. Just get those rocks out. You know, if you have woods nearby, just chuck them in there or put them in buckets and take them away, because it's going to interfere with this cultivating in a bad way, right? Every time you hit a rock. Okay, so you just go in one direction. You don't need to go back and forth, right? You know, unless it's really compacted. And then that's it, right? A lot easier, a lot faster than the hand tool, right? And you can do your edges this way too. So let's say you've been doing this all season, and let's say you're getting close to like not having a lot of weeds. They just pop up randomly, and this is going to take a couple of years, right? I think, for it to be really weed free if you're constantly doing this. And what you can do at that point is what I call just spot cultivating, and that's just where you take, you know, your favorite cultivator, and it's just where you walk around the garden. You're looking for weeds to kill. I see one there. So, and what you want to do is just make sure the roots are exposed, right? And the warmer, the sunnier the day, the better this works. And I just walk around and look, and I see, you know, a reasonably sized one right here, and you can kill him as long as you go, right? And you see I flip him over, and now the root is up and exposed, and that's going to die, right? It doesn't necessarily work during cultivation because you're going to be cutting off, you know, the root, and then it will just grow back. But if you can do that as you're going, that's going to just lay there, die in the sun, shrivel up, and it will be over. If there's something that, like grass, where you're not going to be able to get it out with this, right, I'll just bend over and take it out. And in a second I'll show you the tool I use for that. Okay, but this is everything that I want to be doing standing up and just killing weeds, right? This isn't trying to cultivate the whole surface. It's just walking around and looking for any of those guys that maybe are living next to the vegetable, right? Or he didn't die. And just walk back and forth on the paths. Yeah, you can take this time to look for pests or disease. You can think about what your next thing you're going to plant is, or think about whatever you want. It's nice and relaxing, right? And I see some weeds over here, right? And you're putting your effort into just making sure that each one is gonna die. So I make sure I'm not burying him, right? There's a bunch of little tiny ones. You can just, you know, give them the business, go back and forth, try to kill them that way. You know, when you get to the point of spot cultivation, it's just nice. You know, you're just walking around and tidying up a little bit. So I'm going to show you the last thing, which is the tool I use for getting rid of bigger weeds. All right, so this is just a weed hook. That's what I call it. And it's just a way to be able to dig out the roots of some bigger weeds. So if you have something that you can't get it out, you know, this, you know, will help you loosen the soil and then, you know, be able to dig it out. And it works really nice for that. You can even probably dig out a dandelion with this, just get a bit deeper with it. And, you know, this is just perfect for those perennials. You know, and look, perennials are hard to get out, but, you know, because they are a perennial, once you get out this isn't a perennial, but once you get out a perennial weed in its root, it's gone forever, right? So you can feel good about it. You know, the annuals that you're cultivating, they're going to be blowing back in year after year after year, and you have to continue to cultivate. It'll never stop. It'll get better with as you lower the seed bank, and also as your soil is better balanced, you'll actually have less weeds. But the perennials, once you remove them, they're gone forever. And that's really nice. So it's worth it to put in the work so that you can, and enjoy a weed-free garden.